All right, again, forgive the mess, but it's been a while since I posted on the 1940 Buick as far as the electric steering goes. It's kind of busy, but ultimately this is what I came up with. This is all assembled, and this is the same bearing right here. It's 42 millimeters on the outside, 20 millimeters on the inside. This shaft is 13/16, so we had to turn it down to 20 millimeter or somewhere around there. It's not like a perfect fit. Doesn't really matter too much. As you can see, it's actually, it fits well. What I decided to do, as far as the little joint is concerned, and this is using just to refresh everybody's memory. Where am I? This was from a Nissan Cube. Okay, this is just little studs I had in here. I haven't figured out how to mount this, but I'll tell you how far I got so far, and it's going to be very interesting to say the least. So, getting there. So basically this guy here was, I'm trying to find the original shaft that it came off of and what we machined. It's in another video, what I gather part 1. Yes, it's right here. So we had cut this guy off of here. There was no splines. It ended up being, we just had to enlarge it out a little bit, and then we got it to fit on. And basically 8 millimeter or 5/16 bolt is going to go through there. The only problem is when I bolted it in, unless I really, rip it down, really tight, which I haven't done yet, it kind of, you hear click, 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 click. There's a little bit of play in the bolt. So I don't know, I might just shove some epoxy with the bolt just to make it take up the space, or something along those lines. As long as I may use plastic epoxy so it can come out easier or heat it up, not metal epoxy. But this is the original shaft, and I don't know if I should go into how much I cut off, but basically after I cut it to this position here, it's kind of an arbitrary amount. I mean, here's the hole that the linkage here goes into. Ultimately, from the edge of the hole, it's like 6 1/4, and then we machined just about half the bearing. I think it's 47 thousandths, 12 millimeter, and we originally took off the 22, and then we had to take off another, so it's basically halfway. And it really would have depended where I put the this guy here. So it could have changed. We could have cut this off maybe slightly different, maybe not, because of the way it's tapered here. See, that was basically the full amount of this. Okay, so that being said, this guy, goes in the back here. Like I said, I haven't figured out this guy yet, but I pretty much figured out how long everything has to be. Now this shifter linkage, that's going to be another thing, because with these electric power steerings, you really can't avoid having a problem here. I bought one for a Toyota Yaris. Okay, that's this guy right here, because I know that the housing was smaller, but then this comes up on the right side. Okay, it's a bit of a problem, and it really doesn't solve what I'm going to have as the problem here, because the shaft still has to come right above it, and there's not much room, and the bolt is really lined up here. And yeah, you can start putting this shit down, and then it's kind of really in the way, it gets close to the gas pedal. I haven't really measured it 100%, but it would make more sense to have the motor like this so you don't see it. But then now you have even more, things in the way. And it's like, damn, I went through this, pondering this in my head before, because I recently done, if you look at my other videos, I have a Ford Festiva I did, and it ended up being I didn't use the Yaris, which is a smaller one. I used the Prius, and it came out mint. So this one, the motor goes to the left. Now that sounded like a great idea too, but then I realized, because this is the angle. Let's just say this is the angle of the car, of the steering column. This guy slides over, of course. How the heck did this move? Okay, this is like a little clamp that's in here that holds the the tube. So basically, the tube is, you know, bigger than that, but about the same. But you see this angle here? This is the angle that it comes up. This is parallel to the car, you know. This is flat, in other words. So what happens is the motor, which is going to be, you know, out a little bit further, you know, this comes out and that comes out in that angle, and the firewall is like right around here. So I'm like, oh my God, this is going to hit. So there's a lot of angle involved. So you got to rotate it in order to get it to clear. So that's another thing. But it kind of puts me in a better place as far as here is concerned. But to you know, to make this a little quicker than it's already been, this is the inner part that goes inside this guy. Okay, this is going to have to be cut, and you're going to have to put extensions and some, sorry, my finger's not being seen. You're going to have to cut this rod, go like this, and like this. So when you shift, it actually, you know, articulates around this, you know, and then the rod is still got to go in the inside of this. So then this, wherever you cut this rod, it's got to extend further, and it also has to have this thing that comes around the motor, and it's got to be strong enough to move this. So this is not going to be that easy, you know, and I knew this was an issue, and that's why I ended up hastily buying the one for the Yaris, thinking I have it. I have one for the Kia, forgot what this is, but it's a bigger Kia. This thing is gigantic. Supposedly it works, you know, on fail-safe mode, but holy cow, this thing is just a gigantic monster, although it's actually to the right, which would be good, and it's a small motor then, you know, and then you could still, you know, rotate it, but pretty much you'd have to have it pointed down. I tell you that the left-handed motor to me makes more sense, and I think I'll see it less, because ultimately I'm going to have it where it's about like this, straight on in the car, because it'll clear the firewall. Because like I said, every time you rotate this up, if it's at this kind of angle, you rotate it, it gets closer to the firewall. So that's going to be an issue. See, basically what I wanted this thing to be in 3 separate pieces. So this is complicated because you got to put both pieces inside there. So, but ultimately this needs to be bolted in separately. This needs to be bolted in separately so it can be serviced, you know, God forbid. And then the front part has to be bolted in. Hang on, maybe I should put on the light, because, all right, so by doing this, see what happens, like with the Ford Festiva, I cut up the original pipe and I welded the original pipe to the original pipe of the modern car. I really didn't want to do that because it's just, there's so much going on in a 40s car, you know, and so what I devised here is this. Basically this guy slides on there, and you can see already what I've done here, because to me the big problem is the horn. Okay, so right here I have a lot of room to articulate through here. My friend has a lathe, so this is why people want me to do this. I'm like, my friend's doing it for me. I did it for one other car. You know, he's a full-time fireman, and he just likes to do this on the side. So like, it's something that I can't do for everybody, but ultimately I just got to shave this a little bit more. But I had him machine a plumbing, a 3/4 plumbing union, a PVC union. Let me turn the light down a little. So when he machined it, it was a little tight. It was actually loose, and then when he took it off the lathe, it was actually tight again, because then we cut the outside. This is a typical plumbing pipe from Home Depot, 1.25 inch. It's the 20 gauge. Maybe I would have gotten the thinner one just because it would move on better, but I just felt it was better to be stronger. It's pretty strong piece here. So I basically grinded it and cut it and tried to take off all the chrome. It was very hard to cut, and then it was dinged in. And then in all, the piece got tight. I pressed this on in the press. Now it wasn't this far before. It was actually right where I wanted it. And when I started pressing on this one, after I sanded enough off, it started pushing this again. I was like, ah. So I put everything upside down here. I just, whatever I rigged, I put it here, and I used the bolt buster. Okay. So basically, that's the This is the thing that heats up bolts. So I used one of the big ass things right here, and I heated around it, and it just started melting the plastic, and I did it about 3 or 4 times. I heated it up. So when I heated it up, it just very simply, with just me holding it, I kept pushing, and it pushed it out nicely over here because it was already down. But over here, like I should have made the sleeve a little smaller or made the plastic longer, because this is going to be for the horn. A lot of guys, I've seen other guys, they have a button, they get electric steering done in an old car. They don't take into account for this, and I refused to not have the horn by regular means. You know, I don't care for that. You know, so I bought a Jeep, a '60s Jeep, or now this guy I bought. I was thinking about putting it here, but the problem is that every time it ended up, it has to go inside this. So to put a switch in there, it would have been difficult. I can actually leave it on just in case. I was going to epoxy it on, but it's kind of loose fitting. But, you know, you could do other things. You don't have to do what I did. But basically, this is going to be the only thing that's kind of exposed, and it's very wide. This is the switch for the Jeep. This is just a little tiny pin that, you know, so I got to mount this somewhere on the outside here. Like you see, in hindsight, this thing wasn't working anyway on the original one. But you can see there's this extra support around here. It's just a split piece of mild steel that goes over the shaft to hold it. It was all down the whole shaft, so it's there as well. So I kind of didn't want to get rid of it from here to here. Plus, it gave the bearing something to stop on. So I figured all that out too, distance. So having the bearing this far, having the shaft with the support shaft helped everything, but I could have probably taken this off and reused it, even if I had to, you know, grind it down. But then again, that was only if I was putting it on this shaft, the original shaft. That's where it went, the original shaft, which is a 13/16 shaft. It's so stupid, it's not even funny. All the sizes on these old cars, they don't exist anymore with a lot of stuff. So now I have this on the Nissan, and I have this all here. You know, this is going on. It's just going to work out really good, you know, and because the way it works out, when all is said and done, this shaft here is going to be like this, and you know, I know it just went in a little bit, but ultimately this goes over this. Actually, it's not now. Now it's not going. It was just falling right over this, but I think it has something to do with the way it was. I cut it with a pipe cutter, so there's a burr in here. I got to take off that burr, and then it'll slide over. And worst case scenario, I got to cut more off or whatever, even if it has to butt up against it. Again, I wanted separate pieces. So now this is my other plan. So you have this guy. And basically what I went to my friend today to do, besides this plastic thing, is... now the guy who sold me the Nissan thing from eBay, he sold me the piece that is inserted into the... steering wheel. He hacked it out of the steering wheel. So, like, you know, some people, I guess, they machine the original steering wheel and they press this in and weld it in, and then they use it and they make this the new shaft. Now that has a ton of problems with this particular one because of just the way the shaft has to go. The small shaft has to go in there, the big shaft goes there, it tapers down to there. I'm like, that's kind of crazy. I'm not going to do that. But I did think I can utilize this, because it leaves this guy alone. It lets me use this whole thing. Now, a lot of these new cars, they have these, everything's metric. And a lot of these bearings are metric now. So the same bearing I got over here, I ended up buying 2 of them, and I was going to machine this because it doesn't fit. Like you see, it doesn't fit. I was going to machine the whole bearing. Ends up being, my friend had already cut this bearing like in May, and I lost it. So it was a Chinese bearing. We got a national bearing, and the thing wouldn't cut. It was really hard. So got to be careful what you choose. Now, there's another bearing. This is 42 millimeters on the outside and 20 millimeters on the inside. I got a bearing with 40 millimeters on the outside, but it's only from China. It's some weird number. I can't cross-reference it anywhere, but it's coming in the mail, and it should fit inside this thing. Worst case scenario, it needs minor machining. But once I put it into the shaft, I'm going to drill like 3 holes and put 3 set screws, or just weld it in, something along those lines. It may even press in. It may be so tight, because ultimately I wanted this shaft to be supported, because what happens is if you just weld this haphazardly onto here, okay, the original shaft onto here, what ends up happening is that you weld it, and then it could be wobbly, it could be this, it could be that. But what I wanted to do is, like, let's say, well, in this case, I wanted to thread it on here, but obviously you can't, thread it, because then it'll be tight. So you got to thread it and weld it to some degree. But overall, I didn't want to mess with this design, because this is kind of big here and it gets thinner, and I know it's hardened, but I didn't like hacking into this just to put this other thing in there, because this is already a hollow piece right here, and I'll show you what we did in a minute. So basically, I found the original bearing that is supposed to go in here is in this guy. This is what I cut off, and you can see that's a 20 millimeter on the inside, but the other side is small, and you'd have to hack all that up. I had since, hacked that down, but this fits on there. So the bearing that I bought, that's going to be 40 millimeters, is going to fit inside there. This is going to fit perfectly. We made a spacer of a little bit softer material. It only fits on one way because it was kind of mushroomed already. Okay, because we figured it out of how much, because what happens is if I just put this guy on here, this can walk forward, because the original one was a thinner bearing. It was 20 millimeter. There's a room right there for the notch for the snap ring, but this totally covers it. So the way I figured it out, I'm going to do that. I'm going to put that. I'm going to use the original nut to tighten it so this forces itself on. Okay, then. Now, what I don't recommend, but it's so tight, we actually used a 1/4-inch plumbing pipe because he didn't have the right metric thing. It's very close, and then because it was tapered, we had to keep drilling out the threads here. But there's actually a lot of threads catching this, more than you think. This is actually not as much as I would like, But no matter what, with some kind of threading and me putting that tight, that is going to be very tight, and then I'm going to weld it all the way around here. It ain't going nowhere, and it's not like you can just unscrew it. You have to break the weld. The only thing that could happen is that you break the what do you call it? You break the threads, just pull right out. But there was a point where we had so many threads, we ended up going, like I said, a little too far, but because I'm really only getting one thread around here now that I'm looking at it. It's not as good as I would have liked to have been. But worst case scenario, I was going to drill it out, put a freaking helicoil in there, whatever it takes. But I should have just let it alone and told him to start it, because it ended up being that the pipe thread was very close to this metric thread. I mean, really close. And I wish I had more threads, but then it was going to move everything up. And so if you had to do it on your own, just get the right tap. Don't rush it like I did. So I was like, yeah, just do that. It'll be fine. But I just thought about, I thought about yanking on the steering wheel and it coming forward, So being that all these pieces are going to be bolted into the car, this is going to be separate. This is sliding on this shaft, and then this is really permanently on here. And this will be connected to the tube. It really cannot go anywhere. And worst case scenario, if I really wanted to, I could technically weld on the inside, but it was not my intention. Oh wait, look what I did. I think I have it on backwards. No, because it wasn't on all the way. Well, how's that? Oh, there we go. Now I just had a burr on it or something. Nah, that makes more. I'm like, I thought I had more threads than that. Boom, there we go. So it gets tight here at the end, but it's really on. So it's amazing how this particular metric thread, I think it's 16 millimeter by 1.5. Like I said, you can get the whole thing threaded, the right thread, and be fine. But it ended up being that really worked, and it's really tight now, and there's a lot of threads holding it. I just didn't have it on right before. But once I weld this around, not only is it going to be pinned straight, this is going to technically, if I want to take out the whole front section of the column, I mean, I could probably leave all the wiring attached and everything too. And look, the whole thing is going to, the only problem with this, and I didn't want to not leave it in there. Hang on. The problem is this guy right here, this little thing. It actually got bent on me because I took it off because it was a pain in the ass. But it actually helps, and if I obviously have more leverage, I would be able to do it. I'm holding the phone. So this whole thing will come out with this front shaft here. And as you can see now, this has a weird bearing. So being that this bearing is going to be attached to here, whether it's pressed in, whether I drill a couple holes and tack weld it or whatever, it's going to be pretty much permanent in there. And you can see the line that the bearing made. I think one guy had one of these bearings on eBay. It's really not, it's not too bad, you know. It works just fine. And once it's on, where am I? You can see where the, you know. So basically that's going to go there. So that's even with that. And you can see how this is actually supposed to go over there. Worst case scenario, I have to cut some off, but that's, you know, cutting it off is better than not. So then you know, the other way, cutting off too much already. But even then, you can still weld on. So this was the piece basically that is off right now. So what I say this was, I was thinking it was like 6 1/4 from that hole. But even if you had to go, just so you know, just I'm giving you these things only because I don't know if you're gonna do it to a 40 Buick or not, because it seems like every year there's a different steering box on these cars. Everything is kind of like crazy. I was trying to make something else. I do things in my head, and then I try to get things started, and then I go, that ain't gonna work. You know, that was a waste of time. I don't like to just draw things up, but that's exactly 18 inches, and I think I did it like that on purpose. So that's 18 inches. This guy is like 19 1/8, and then the part I cut off I think was 9 inches. 9 and, oops, I don't know why it's basically 9 1/16, 9 1/8, something like that. So, and if you go like this, by the time you factor in, you know, I basically factored it from here because this guy has to go on there. So by the time you're done with all this, because then you got the bearing, so it goes a little past there. So basically that's what lines up with that line right there. So technically it should go over until there. Whoops, that doesn't help. Sorry, I work on like a ton of different stuff, and I'm always doing something. And I got a Chevy Celebrity diesel that I'm doing a lot of work to. That's my car. It's a lot of things I'm involved in, and other people's cars too. But if you line up this line now with this, and this guy here gets lined up with the edge of that, this leaves this right about here. Like I said, this could be cut down again. It's not a big deal. But ultimately, I want this to slide over it so it's independent. This will bolt in separately, and hopefully I can get it solid because there's not a lot of places to mount it. And ultimately, like I said, I wanted this front section wanted it to slide out, but I didn't want it to be locked in there where if I had to remove it, I have to take off the steering wheel, take off this, take off that, and take out the motor all in one shot. This way I can actually leave the steering wheel on and actually pull it off all together, and it'll just slide right out. And it ain't going anywhere yet. You know, if this was, you know, if I needed it to be, you know, a 1/4 inch either way, it'd be fine. And when I put this switch in here, because here's the other thing. This guy here, there's little screws here. So if that's equal with the top there, see that screw right there? That lines up with these screws right here. So after you cut it off, this is how much I have exposed, because this is, you know, that thing is going to go inside here. So you really can't access that. That kind of sucks, so I was saying. So I'm like, everything I do with the horn has got to be after this point. So you see, basically that's where I'm at. I'm right there. So I'm just going to be able to put, you know, I don't kind of want it on the bottom. If I have to, I will. I'd probably put the hole on the top, just because you can not see it, and ultimately I don't want to see it. The firewall has leather on. I figured I'd get some kind of like leatherish kind of looking thing that goes over the motor, because I use classic cars in TV and movies, and I've yet to use this car, and it's not nearly the shape I need it to be in, and I'm going to add air conditioning. So I put a screw-on oil filter. You probably can see my other videos. This is modern seats in here from a Cadillac, but there's a lot going on here, and converting to 12 volts, and the wiring is all crazy, and I'm like, let's put electric steering in and give myself more of a conundrum, you know? So, but ultimately, with this thing screwed in and welded with the spline, it ain't going anywhere. It's basically going to be one shaft. If I wanted to, I can technically, you know, leave this guy out and weld it to the shaft, or weld it to the shaft and, you know, drill a hole through this. I'm sorry, I'm not putting the camera right. I'm a terrible cinematographer. So put a hole right through there and put a tack weld to the shaft, one way or the other. But this, what's cool about this now, when all is said and done, I talk about this, I got to solder a wire. Look, there's a hole here. That's normally for your, on the modern car, that's where the steering wheel lock is, okay? But now you see I'm unscrewing this from here. Now, of course, you know the original one. Let me put it against the light. See, there's a hole. Well, it just so happens that this guy has a hole. How fucking cool is that? Now, I don't remember if the other shaft from the other ones have a hole also, but no matter what, it's kind of meant to be. Like, why wouldn't you want to do it like that? Yeah, this guy has a hole. I just don't remember what the deal is, because I didn't have the same type of horn on a Ford Festiva. But ultimately, this is working out really well. And like I said, I could technically put that guy on there too. But as you can see from before, what I was talking about, if that's lined up with that thing, and ultimately this is right around where it's going to be, and it's got to go through there. Whether I cut that down or not is another story. If I would have the switch here, and this guy is basically here, if the switch is over here, then I got all this to fight with here. It's double wrapped, and how am I going to fit a switch in there, you know? So, I mean, I might be able to put it on the bottom here to go through both. I think that's not, you know, if you need electric steering, but you can't make it look too terribly out of whack, you know? And this is the only switch I know I can get easily, so I want to kind of work with it. And I wanted the original. This is also from the same car. They sell both, but the Jeep has a much smaller steering column. It's at least 3/4 of an inch thinner than this, or at least a half inch. You know, so now that I have this guy on, this is 1.25 inches by itself. So that's going to work out. It's gonna make the contact. You know, and like I said, the only thing I got to do, because I was pressing it in. I don't know if you can see in the light, but it got a little marred up. I started using a file, but I'm probably going to ask my friend if he would just take the lathe and just clean this up, and that way it's fine. It's not making a connection now. I tested it with the test light here, just to give you an idea. Put a jumper pack on. Now, hard to do. Okay, so jumper pack, the ground is on there, the positive of the jump pack is on there. You touch anywhere here, light lights up. But you go here, light, no light, light, no light. So that's going to work. I did play with it a little bit in the beginning, and it was ultimately, it was actually contacting a hair, and by grinding it, I helped it. But I just want to make it a little more perfect. You see, there's a piece of metal right there. It's very close. So I just want to clean that up. But other than that, it came out great. I think it's going to really, you know, work out pretty well. I got to wait for the bearing to come from China, and then I'm going to start thinking about putting this together. But I got a Chevy Celebrity that I have not been filming anything, but very rare car, center console, two-door car. Has some rust. But right now I'm holding the motor and up. And I don't know, maybe I'll make more. Took the subframe out. Not pulling the tranny, but I'm doing the injectors, I'm doing the motor mounts, I'm doing the rack and pinion, because I had to do the heater core. All that to do the heater core, because you cannot get to this car. It's a really long heater valve that goes right in with two little hoses. And I don't know if I have the old heater valve around. I know I work like a slob. I don't know how I do this, but you know what? You close the garage door and the mess goes away. Yes, so this is like an easy heater core to do normally, but because there's a shield blocking this was in there. That's the two hoses on the heater core, and this goes up. This hose is not available. That hose is not available. So basically I went to the auto parts store and I kept trying to, like, this section of this hose, which is like from a Ford Taurus, this section here is very close to what the original one was. So that's going to go in for one side, and the other one I have another hose coming for that. And so much shit. It's literally shoehorned. When everybody says, you know, to me, how do you reach back there? I says, you can barely put your fingernail back there. You know, but that's that. I got another speedometer for the car. I got, I'm going to put in a temperature gauge and a voltmeter as opposed to the lights that were there, you know. But there's something about the cars I think they're really cool, you know. So I get different stuff, you know, that I particularly have. So, but this thing needs a lot of work. This is 40 Buick. I did convert to disc brakes, and I got a proportioning valve in here. The dual master, that came out pretty well, you know. So I got an aluminum radiator from a Chevy that I'm kind of rigging. I re-welded it, took it to my guy to re-weld it, and I got to figure out a way. I want to get a way to get this front grille